Title insurance. Obviously, a full treatment of title insurance is beyond the scope of this presentation. It's a pretty complex area with available endorsements, typical exceptions, the kind of policies that one can obtain. But the answer, I believe, to the question of do I need an owner's policy, and there are flippers who don't get an owner's policy in order to save some money. But I believe the answer to this is yes, and there are a number of reasons why. The first is that you should understand that title insurance is protecting you more than just with respect to the title. Do you own the property or do you not own the property? Although that's a pretty important thing. But it's also protecting you from things like encroachments on the property. If someone has built something that is on your land, the land that you just bought, but there's the corner of somebody else's garage is actually on the property. And this is an example that's come up within the last few months at Backflip. Title insurance will protect you from encroachments, easements, and things like that, where there might be a use of the land that is contrary to your use of the land. So it does have a lot of value. And yes, your loan that you're going to obtain from Backflip to flip the property is probably going to be a short-term loan, but your ownership interest in the property may not be so short-term. It may extend beyond the loan. You may pay off the loan with other funds and own the property either as a rental or otherwise. And so having the title insurance will protect you during a gap period, or long-term, if you get a new policy and you refi out from Backflip's loan, you'll get a substantial savings on obtaining an owner's policy again during the refi process. And so that money will not be lost. The second point here is about the lender policy typically is limited to the amount of the lender's loan. And that is typically going to be less than the value of the property. And so you're not going to be fully insured. And there won't necessarily be a commonality of interest between you and Backflip or whatever other lender you have, depending upon the scenario. The lender just wants to get paid off and move on, but there may be other issues of liability that can be covered by title insurance, one of which is that environmental horror story that I told earlier about the meth lab that was previously on your property, or perhaps what's called a lust problem in environmental law, a leaky underground storage tank. Maybe there's a heating oil tank and the property was heated by heating oil at one point, and that heating oil is leaked out into the soil and is causing a problem. Title insurance will protect you from that if you get it. And that liability for environmental issues is statutory and will almost definitely exceed the value of the property. So the lender will not be too worried about that, but you need to be worried about it. The next thing is the survey. And you'll note that a survey is being required by Backflip right now. Why is this? That is because, and it's required by most lenders in this space, because the secondary loan market, when these loans are sold or refinanced, requires affirmative insurance coverage for easements and encroachments. An easement being someone's right to use the property, and an encroachment being where there's a permanent improvement or structure that is across the line and in this property. Or perhaps your house is on somebody else's, partly on somebody else's property. So affirmative insurance coverage is required for that by the secondary mortgage market. And in order to issue the appropriate endorsement to get that, a closing agent will often require a survey, and it has to be a recent survey. So that's why surveys are being required. It's not really Backflip that is requiring it. It goes further up the chain in the mortgage finance process to find the reason why a survey is required. But I believe that you should want a survey, and anyone buying real estate should want a survey. It's pretty easy to read a survey, and you will be surprised at the things that can be revealed by looking at that survey. And that's a segue to my final point, which is you are on the ground looking at the real property. And so you need to be looking out for potential easement and encroachment issues, because one of the available endorsements on a title policy that Backflip will not require is coverage for easements and other adverse uses of the land that would be visible upon an inspection of the land. We don't require it because it would increase the expense of the insurance policy. The closing agent would actually have to send someone out to the property to look around to see what they could see. And so we're not going to force that extra expense on you, and would potentially delay closing. But you are going to be looking at these properties physically. So when you go out and you're inspecting the properties, keep an eye out for things that might be an issue. Is there a shared driveway? Does it look like there's a path that lead or ruts for tires that lead across the corner of the property and go into somebody else's property? And so they've been utilizing this as a means of access to their property potentially for years. That could be an easement issue that no one would really know about except for examining the property. And you're doing that examination. And so I urge you to keep your eyes open and be thinking about potential easement and encroachment issues that you might see. And a fresh survey is definitely a good thing to have. You're buying property that may not have been surveyed for decades. And so people have made changes to the property. They built swimming pools. They've added on additions, and all sorts of changes to the property may have occurred that could be either they're encroaching now on your property, or you and the improvements that you're hoping to buy and improve are actually partially on somebody else's land, and you need to know that before you buy it. And so having a survey and getting survey coverage can protect you from those kind of risks that may or may not be visible to the naked eye.